All right, let's jump right into it. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube speculating that Nipsey Hussle did not own the Marathon clothing store or any of the commercial property associated with that property. Now, they're talking about David Gross. David Gross as the owner of everything. People are speculating, many YouTube channels are speculating that Nipsey Hussle was duped out of all of his investments. That includes the Marathon clothing store, Vector 90. You know, Nipsey Hussle was reluctant. Well, he wasn't particularly happy once he became more knowledgeable about the business endeavors associated with Vector 90. I'm going to throw some information out there today, and I want you guys to kind of look at things from a different light and open your eyes and tell me if you still feel the same way after watching this video and what I bring to the table. Let's start by going over some business terms. Now, these business terms I didn't particularly learn in business school when I pursued my undergraduate and I was doing my understudy in business. I didn't learn these terms. I learned these terms way after the fact. So it's safe to say that this information isn't readily taught in our schools and it's not necessarily taught in our colleges. All right, so the few terms we're going to go over is venture capitalist, accredited investor, non-accredited investor, living trust, an estate. A venture capitalist is an investor that provides capital to firms exhibiting high growth potential in exchange for an equity stake. So if I wanted to invest into a block of commercial buildings and I didn't have all the money to do so, however, I knew that another company was investing in very similar investments, I'm going to put my money with them. I'm going to hedge my money with them. And while they invest, I'm still growing my money, and my money is going to get bigger over time and potentially yield a higher percentage than if I put my money in the bank. So that's what venture capitalism is. You're going to put your money with an investor with the intentions that your money is going to grow because they're investing into the type of things that you want to invest in. Well, you might want to know if I can make that type of investment, man, why didn't I know this all the time? You know, why didn't I already know about this information? Well, there's something that prohibits you from investing in venture capitalist firms. Venture capitalist firms particularly invest in early startups. So those are businesses that are going to start up like Ring. Ring is on everybody's door now. You can answer your phone from your app. You can see who it is while you're not home. Nas was an early investor in Ring. Nas made, I think it was reported that he made about $40 million off of his investment in Ring. So those are the type of venture capitalist small startups where you can invest in early in the game. Now, there is something that prohibits the everyday average individual from investing into those particular startup companies. And that's the fact that the next term that we're going to talk about is accredited investor. Not everybody is an accredited investor. To be an accredited investor, you have to have an earned income that exceeds $200,000 on an annual basis for a consecutive 2 years. Now, if you are married, you can also qualify for this if you have an earned income of $300K. Or if you have a net worth of $1 million, you can become an accredited investor. And there is an unlimited amount that you can invest into any startups. This process is monitored and governed by the Securities Exchange Commission. People oftentimes relate to it as the SEC. So the SEC governs this, and if a venture capitalist allows you, someone who doesn't qualify, to invest into a venture capitalist startup project, then that company can be fined. So they're not going to take the risk on allowing a non-accredited investor to invest into a fund that only an accredited investor can invest in. So that brings me to my next vocabulary term, and that is a non-accredited investor. That's typically most of us listening to this YouTube page. If you're a non-accredited investor, that means you don't meet the requirements of what I spelled out to be an accredited investor. You don't make over $200,000 a year for 2 consecutive years. You don't have a net worth of $1 million. So that means you are a non-accredited investor. That's how you are seen in the eyes of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The non-accredited investor term is a relatively new term, and it only came about in 2015 when the Jobs Act, when some changes was made to the Jobs Act. The Jobs Act it stands for Jumpstart Our Business Startups. That's what the Jobs Act is. It doesn't necessarily mean jobs, J-O-B, like we know a job. No, it's the Jumpstart Our Business Startups. This particular policy was created actually back in the 1933 when it was initially created, over 86 years ago. And some changes was made to the 2012 Jobs Act that led also to some subsequent changes being made in 2015 that really blew things out of the water. It changed the game for us as minorities like it's never had before. There's some significant opportunities that comes with the Jobs Act of 2015 that I'm going to get into here in a moment. All right, before I get into the Jobs Act 2015, that's kind of the highlight of this video. We're going to also talk about a living trust. A living trust is a written legal document through which your assets are placed into a trust for your benefit during your lifetime, and then transferred to designated beneficiaries at your death. Now, this is particularly important because we're talking about Nipsey Hussle, and we're talking about David Gross, and how all of the assets that Nipsey Hussle procured through any investments or any acquisitions with David Gross. People are speculating that Nipsey Hussle doesn't own any of that. He doesn't own the Marathon store. He doesn't own any of the commercial property when they say that he bought back the block. Now that's particularly interesting to me because I know what a living trust is. And there's no way in hell that Nipsey Hussle would make any type of investment and not have a living trust or an estate where he can make sure that what he invested, his hard-earned money, can be passed down to his beneficiaries. Passed down to Laura London, passed down to his son or his daughter. So the last vocabulary word, and we're going to jump into these other two topics. The last term is estate. After someone dies, someone must deal with their money and their property. They need to pay off their debts. They need to make sure that their property and their assets are adequately distributed to their beneficiaries. That's what an estate is. Estate is where you determine what happens to your assets when you die. All right, so we talked about venture capitalists. There's a lot of different venture capitalist firms on Google. If you just Google the top 10 venture capitalist firms, you're going to come up with a long list of different firms that you can look at. And those are firms that you can, if you are an accredited investor, you probably already know this, you can go and invest your money. If you're a non-accredited investor, then you can strive to become an accredited investor, and you can invest in some of those startups through those websites. All right, we talked about accredited investor, the non-accredited investor, the living trust, the estate, and holding company. I'll talk about that a little later, and we'll go over one particular company that can help you structure all this. All right. So we're gonna cross over and we're gonna jump into what a Tier 2 Reg A equity-based crowdfunding policy is, and how the Jobs Act of 2012 changed the game for us as minorities, and how we can really, as non-accredited investors, change and make a change in our communities and really buy back the block for the first time ever in the history of this country. All right, there are two policies that can really have a significant impact on the minority community and our ability to buy back the block like we never have before. So the first one, they go hand in hand. They're kind of tandem. The first one is Tier 2 Reg A. Tier 2 Regulation A is a equity-based crowdfunding policy. That's exactly what it is. And when you think crowdfunding, it's not your typical crowdfunding. When you go to these crowdfunding sites and you want to, give a charitable gift to these individuals, no, it's different. When you give an equity-based, with the key word on equity, and the key reason why I call this platform, equity over everything, is because it's equity-based. We're not dealing with charity. We're not a charity case anymore. We're beyond that point. The African American community African descendants of slaves, however you want to call it. We used to be the charity case, the charity basket case of America, but now we're in a position where, don't look at us as charity cases. We want equity in everything we do. This is our opportunity. So this is an equity-based crowdfunding policy that was created where we can take this thing by our own hands, by our own collective, and we can just have an impact, have our own impact. We don't have to wait for the government. We don't have to wait for anybody else to come and do something for us. We can do something for ourselves through this policy. All right, so this is Title IV of the Jobs Act of 2015, where in a 12-month period, we can raise up to $50 million. All right, I'm gonna say that one more time. In a 12-month period, we can raise up to $50 million based on the policy of this Tier 2 Reg A Equity-Based Crowdfunding. I mean, we can buy back a lot of block with $50 million every 12 months. There are some reporting requirements for someone who files for this type of Reg A policy through the SEC. Yeah, but I think it's well worth it. If you have a credible business, credible fund manager, and they want to put together something like this for our communities, I think it's worth going through the reporting policies and the audits that we have to go through on an annual basis for this particular thing. Now, what's key about this Tier 2 Reg A Equity-Based Crowdfunding policy is that it allows for the first time since 1933 non-accredited investors. That means individuals like you and me, individuals who don't make over $200,000 or $300,000 with our spouse, and we don't have a net worth over $1 million. We're non-accredited investors. We can now invest in startups. We can now invest into the purchase or the acquisition of residential and commercial real estate in our areas. We can do so much, man. We can really buy back the block. We can stop talking about it. We can stop the catchphrase, and utilizing the catchphrase because it's nice and trendy. We can really go back and buy back the block. We can really do it. Now, this policy also has a stipulation where the non-accredited investor can only invest 10% of your annual income. So if you make $100,000 a year, you can invest $10,000 towards this particular fund, or towards in a 12-month annual period. So that is the stipulation. Accredited investor, there's no stipulations on how much you can invest, but there is a stipulation with a non-accredited investor. You can only invest 10% of your annual income. All right. So next, we're going to get into the big thing that opportunity zones. Opportunity zones is what our opportunity, the David Gross company. David Gross put out our opportunity investment fund. That's going to be ran a little different from the Tier 2 Reg A. I've done a lot of research and I've looked into our opportunity, and I don't see currently that our opportunity, which is owned by David Gross, I don't see where it is a Tier 2 Reg A. I've searched on the SEC's website. I've even searched up Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures, trying to do everything I can to find out whether David Gross has a Tier 2 Reg A platform or policy or investment fund that he's going to roll out here soon. My speculation, I speculate that he will, or they will as a collective, but I can't find it as of yet. But all right, so opportunity zones. Let's jump into this, and then we're going to talk about what opportunity zones really are and what are the benefits of opportunity zones. Okay, opportunity zones are tax incentives to encourage those with capital to invest in low income and undercapitalized. How do opportunity zones work? All right, opportunity zones offer tax cuts and tax incentives to those investors. You are an investor and you're going to invest into a business or the acquisition of a property in these opportunity zones. You're going to receive a tax cut. How much of a tax cut you received is based on how long you hold the investment. There's different tax depreciation schedules for 5, 7, and 10 years. However, if you hold the property for a full 10 years, then you're excluded from paying any taxes on that investment. And that's also to include any capital gains that you've received from the investment of that property. So it benefits you to hold the investment for 10 years if you don't want to pay any taxes on the investment nor the capital gains. As I just stated, the program provides 3 benefits. Temporary deferral of taxes on previously earned capital gains. Number 2, the second benefit is a basis step up of previously earned capital gains invested. And number 3, the permanent exclusion of taxable income on new gains. You're probably asking yourself, what does that mean? The number 2, basis step up of previously earned capital gains invested. Now that's when I was talking about whether you hold the investment for 5, 7, or 10 years. If you hold the property for 10 years, you're going to fall under the benefit number 3, which is the permanent exclusion of taxable income. However, there are different steps, and that's the basis step up for the 5 and 7 year. There's no benefit to investing in an opportunity zone if you're not going to hold the property for a minimum of 5 years. So that's the first, step up basis there. Then the second one is at the 7 year point, and you get another depreciated tax incentive from there. There are a total of 12% of the U.S. Census tracts that are opportunity zones. So that means that there are 8,762 tracts. All right, the governor of all 50 states and 4 U.S. territories, along with the mayor of D.C., are the ones who designated these particular areas to fall under the Opportunity Zone program. So you can go online and you can Google this information. If you want to identify what opportunity zones are in your state, let's say Washington, D.C., you type in Washington, D.C. opportunity zones, and there's going to be a very intuitive link that you can click into, and it's going to break down everything. It's going to show you a map overlay of all the opportunity zones. It's going to show you all the census tracts. It's going to break it down by demographics, how many black, white, Hispanic, whatever. What's the median income level of that area? It has so much information. It's going to break it down and give you all the information about that particular opportunity zone. And that's great information for investors, because you want to know exactly if you're going to put a business in this particular opportunity zone. You want to know, okay, you can forecast based on the income of the population, how long is it going to take you to return, get a return on your investment. Or you can scale that information down to determine what percentage of that population is going to frequent your store. What percentage of that population is going to be your customer base. So that's very important information. And the fact that the census, when you're dealing with the census, they're the ones who have all of the analytics for a particular area. So the fact that this IRS program, Opportunity Zone, is an IRS program that offers you the tax incentive, but they couple the program with the census, who gets all the metrics for everyone in the U.S. So it's a very well thought out process. So we have to do everything we can to benefit from this program. That's why it's when you couple the Tier 2 Reg A with the Opportunity Zones, it's a no-brainer. You can raise up $50 million in a 12-month period through a Tier 2 Reg A Equity-Based Crowdfunding investment fund, and you're going to take advantage of the opportunity to invest into opportunity zones. Now, there's those that feel like if you invest the majority of that money into an opportunity zone, there's a lot of risk, because yes, you're going to save on taxes, but however, investors are looking specifically at how much money they're going to make over time. So you may want to diversify your investments. A fund manager will want to diversify those investments and not put all of the invested funds into an opportunity zone. I get it. That makes sense. All right, now that we got all this information out the way, we went to school, we learned about all these different topics, the Tier 2 Reg A, the opportunity zones, the living trust, the accredited, non-accredited investors, venture capitalism. And now we want to let's take a deeper dive into this David Gross situation. Now, we can't deny the fact, Nipsey Hussle was ahead of his time. He's someone that had his ear to the ground when it came to the investor world. So he had one ear in the street and one ear in the investment world, because he was looking ahead, looking at the future, and looking at how we could stop being victims in our community and turn things around. So, I give a lot of credit, to Nipsey for doing that, because it's not every day that you have a rapper that can provide so much light into a very dark area. The hood is a very dark area. These neighborhoods are very dark areas. So the fact that he provided and inspired us to think on this greater level, I gotta tip my hat off to him. R.I.P. Nip. Now, so Nip in his infinite wisdom of buying back the block, being an independent artist, this is someone who was about to be evicted from his store, the Marathon clothing store. And we all know the story where the owner came to him and said, "Hey, look, man, I don't want to kick you guys out, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to go and buy the store." All right, so Nip had to go and come up with the $2.5 million that was required to buy the store. He's an independent artist. He may have not necessarily had all that money accessible at that particular time. Yeah, you probably got your money in assets. You got your money invested over here, over there. You got the, CBD, marijuana thing you're investing in. I mean, when you got that kind of money, your money is spread out. You're invested into a lot of different things. So did he have 2.5 million sitting by? I don't know. That's not for me to judge. It's not my business. But I'm gonna talk about this particular topic. Now, Nipsey has somebody that's very knowledgeable in David Gross, who's a venture capitalist. He has Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures, right? So the guy's clearly knowledgeable. He's clearly up to speed when it comes to investing. He clearly has a number of investors who would be willing to invest. Not only Nip, but many other artists that he can jump on the phone. Probably individuals. He lives in LA, so he's probably got actors, actresses. Who knows, man? Many people in his Rolodex that he can call and say, "Hey, I got this investment. Do you want in? Do you not want in?" You know what I mean? I guarantee you that many of them will say, "Yeah, come on, man, let's do it. Let's invest." So I highly speculate that the commercial property where the Marathon clothing sat, it was not only, the owners were not only David Gross and Nipsey Hussle or Black Sam and his crew. He probably had some other individuals invest into Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures so that they can acquisition this property. There was a time limit involved, and I think that there was a time limit involved. These guys had to hurry up and come up with the money to invest, and it appears that they came up with the money relatively quickly. And I'm pretty sure Nipsey is a majority stakeholder of of that investment. But what we also gotta consider, although David Gross's name is on the Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures, he's the owner, but there's other contracts that we're not privy to. We're not privy to all the files of Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures to show who the investors are and what percentage of the investments those individuals have. So Nipsey's investment into that commercial property, what we just learned, we talked about a living trust and an estate. So his percentage of ownership is protected. That's what I want you guys, that's the one keynote that I want you to take away from this video. Understand that whatever investment Nipsey had into that organization, his investments are protected. Because I'm pretty sure he's a smart guy. I'm pretty sure he had his living trust already tucked off to the side. That's basic. That's the basic thing. There's more business. Also, that's something I want you guys to understand. There's more businesses than Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures. When you have a structure, when you have structures created, you're not just owning one business. Don't forget, the guy has our opportunities. That's a separate entity. The government, the IRS, Security Exchange Commission, these entities, they look at these LLCs and these ventures as individuals. They have their own individual, just like we have social security numbers, they have tax ID numbers. Those are tax identification numbers. If you go and start a business, a LLC, you're gonna have a tax ID number for that business. It's mandatory. All right. So although Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures is owned by David Gross, I guarantee you that company on paper is also owned by another holding company, because that's just smart business. That's smart business. That's business basics when it comes to business ownership. All right. So where am I getting with this? My main point, like I said, I want you to take away that Nipsey Hussle's estate is intact. His living trust is intact. That's the one takeaway I want you guys to understand from this, because it's business basics. All right, you're probably asking, what's a holding company? All right, a holding company is a company created to buy and possess the shares of other companies, which it then controls. All right, it's just a term I threw out there, and I don't want to throw it out there loosely without providing a definition for it. So, Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures is likely owned by another holding company. That's just the way it goes. So you can go out there and search for, search on Shark Property or Property Shark and all these different websites where you can identify. You can go to the state and you can find out about individuals, who owns what business. But what you won't particularly find investment strategy out there. You won't find a web of businesses, to say, hey, this particular business owns Slauson and Crenshaw Ventures. That strategy isn't out there. You have to know the particular name of the other businesses or the holding companies, or the C corporations, or whatever the companies are. You have to particularly know their names in order to find out and kind of piece this and that together. That information is not readily available. Very much so, such as living trusts and estates. Those are private documents. That stuff is not also readily available out to the public. So that's why we can speculate all day long about what percentage or whether Nipsey owned those properties, or whether, we try to speculate why his name wasn't on the business. Why wasn't he the owner of the business? You can speculate that all day long. But the truth of the matter is, you'll never find out that information. So while the internet is up in a roar, his family, they haven't said a word. His family hasn't said a word about that. So, if we're concerned about that, you probably shouldn't be, because his family is good. If there was such a concern, when all these different individuals tried to put up money to donate to the family after his death, they turned it down. Why? Because they're good. They're good. That's why they turned the money down. They don't need your charity, because Nipsey had the living trust and his estate was in order. All right. Also, we got to talk about this as well. Nipsey was a known, you can say, gang member or former gang member, however you want to classify it. Now, we already know they wanted to kick Nipsey out of those commercial properties. They didn't want his businesses there. They didn't want them hanging around there. So let me ask you this: would it have been smart for Nipsey to purchase those businesses, purchase the commercial properties in his own name? Then we'll be calling Nipsey stupid, because we already know these people, if they want you, they can get you. Now, you're linked to a criminal organization, which is the Rolling 60 Crips. They can pin anything on him. And now they got him for RICO. They got him for racketeering. They can get him for anything. And now, any commercial property or residential properties that's associated that they can point to and say that you was funneling drugs out of or doing anything out of, now those properties are at risk, and the government can come in and take those properties. So one of the smartest things that I think Nipsey did is make sure that you put the properties in a name on paper, and the paper, on paper that's visible to the public, you have those properties in the name of someone who's very clean. And David Gross was that one that was very clean. That's the investment strategy. You want to make sure that you protect your assets in the event that something happens to you. Somebody could have did something to Nip that took Nip back to the street. And if Nip go back to the street, something happened, you want to make sure that, hey, I'm back in the streets. This situation was brought up that took me back to the streets. You know what I mean? The street was still in him, obviously. He smacked that dude at the BET Awards last year. So we know he can go back and get street when he need to. But would it have been smart for him to have those properties in his name? And he's a very public figure. If anybody wants to sue him, guess what? The very first thing they know, oh, that's in his name, I'm gonna sue him. I want a piece of that. Or, you know what I mean? So now those assets are at risk. So just think about it. If you just stop and think about it for a minute, over all the terms we went over and the investment strategy that these guys put together, having that stuff not in his name, having those assets not in his name is probably pretty damn smart on his part. Alright, so there you have it, man. This video is longer than I anticipated. I wanted to get on here for 7 to 10 minutes to kind of talk about this, so it went a little bit longer than anticipated. So that's all I have on the topic. So go ahead and drop your comments down in the comment section below. Subscribe, and let's take this on to another video, and I'll point out a few comments that was put forth in this video in my next video.